Ooh, that wasn't very. Let's make that louder. There we go. Hello everyone, Lisa here. Hashtag 78 days. And today is day 17, and today is, the tower. Oops, the tower. The tower. The tower. Le Maison Dieu. Okay, so this is from the Dodal Tarot, and it's not the deck I'm focusing on, but it gives a more or less conventional interpretation of this card. You know this card, Le Maison Dieu, the tower, as the house of God. I mean, that kind of calls forth the imagery of Babel, the Tower of Babel, and what it means for us to strive, right, toward the heavens. All of the ways in which we strive upward, we strive to advance, we strive to rise, and how in an instant those pretenses, those hopes, those dreams, those more or less self-aggrandizing visions of our world and our hearts and our bodies, our minds, how that can just be flattened, right? Life can just cut us down. And the fact, so this traditionally, it looks, what I love about the Dodal Tarot is because it's sort of hard to say what that is, but, sort of the conventional sense that this is lightning striking, and that the top of the tower calls to mind the crown of a king. And again, with this notion of sovereignty, of like our ideas about ourselves, that we are kind of stable, enduring, sovereign beings that stand alone from the world. The tower reminds us that everything we think we know in a flash can be completely destroyed. Now, I love how this card gets interpreted in the Spanish tarot, this wonderful kind of recreation of the Marseille that is produced in the 1970s. It's a Fournier deck. And what I love about this is that the lightning really, really looks like the laurel bay leaves of triumph, of victory, the laurel crown, right? That does not at all look like lightning. Instead, it recalls the kind of laurel imagery in the Ace of Swords, which I don't have at my fingertips. But if you think about the Ace of Swords and the sword thrusting up through the crown, and then the foliage on either side. So, in the Spanish tarot, that traditional imagery, it points more toward the ways in which these moments of upheaval, right, where everything we think we are comes tumbling down, how there might be something like victory in this, right? Again, a reminder, like we've seen this in death, we see this everywhere in the tarot, a reminder that the kind of that endings are also beginnings, right? And that's a very common way to think about the tower. Like, this is not a moment you chose. You would not have chosen to come tumbling down from the heights. Like, you didn't want this. However, how is this beheading? How is this knocking off of the crown? How is this kind of dissolution of the self, this dissolving of our sovereign pretensions? How is that also something like triumph, something like ecstasy, which is the word that Jodorowsky uses when he talks about this card. And he, in his deck, he likes to see these two figures who are tumbling down as actually in an ecstatic dance, not falling, but instead kind of energetically cavorting toward the ground. That's sort of the traditional imagery. And in this sense, the tower participates in all of these cards we've seen before, where endings are beginnings. But I wanted to focus not on that traditional imagery, but on a much weirder deck. The late 18th century Vandenborg, or Bacchus Tarot, the Flemish Tarot. It was produced by in a Flemish part of the Austrian Netherlands. And it has a lot of kind of not so standard versions of the cards. And here, the tower is actually la foudre, it's actually lightning. So what's drawn attention to in this card is not so much the destruction of a structure, like literally destruction, the undoing of structure, but instead the burst of energy that, and here's I think really important about the imagery here, that this fire, this sudden burst of light or illumination, it doesn't just like take down structure. Like if you think about death and the images of the body decaying and dissolving, it doesn't just take down structure, it actually completely obliterates it in a burst of light. And the focus here is on the light. The focus here is on the burst of illumination. So to me, this becomes a reminder of the ways in which the kind of sudden enlightenment that many of us desire, like that does obliterate things, you know. You don't want to stare into the sun, as we were all told so many times in preparation for the total eclipse, right? You don't want to stare into the sun. That creates blindness. And yet, that burst of light, that incredible release of energy, which obliterates what has come before, leaving no trace, right? That is also the most brilliant force that we can imagine, and the force that many of us wholeheartedly desire in transforming our lives. So I love what happens with this imagery of lightning as it gets picked up in Kim Kranz's The Wild Unknown. So as many of you will remember, because this deck is so familiar to so many of us, the tower here is the lightning striking the tree. Instead of the crown being broken off, we've got the top of this tree, and the tree, this fir tree, I mean, as an Oregonian, like, you know, this imagery is so rich and deep for me, but the fir tree is also the tree associated with the emperor, right? So that destruction in this deck, that destruction of sovereignty again, but that's also the flash of light that we see in Kim Kranz's Eight of Wands. You know, when things really ignite, when movement really happens, when the world really transforms, and transforms not in the slow way that death becomes life, but transforms in a heartbeat. Ignition. That's what lightning is. And so you have the same burst of lightning in the Father of Wands, in the archetype that most embodies the fiery, willful, creative spark that we associate with the wands. That's what the tower is for me. And yeah, you know, what does it mean for everything to burn up completely? Yeah. And as I say this today, I'm noticing the dustiness of my sacred space here. So they're like all these little motes that are dancing in the light. I'm thinking the camera's picking that up. I am not surrounded, well, maybe I am surrounded by little angelic beings, but the other name for those little angelic beings is dust. Such is the magic of light, y'all. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your practice.